Hey everyone, we're going to go over section 2.1 notes today. There are two sections of these notes that we are going to cover this year. This is day one section, and then we will finish off the second part next class. Reminder that next time I see you guys in person, you will have your Unit 1 exam. So be sure that you go and do your Unit 1 study guide today after these notes. And you will also have an assignment that goes along with these notes tonight as well that will be due for next class. So please, please, please make sure you're doing that study guide. Okay, it matches really well with the test. If you get the study guide done, I can grade it, I can send it back to you, give you my feedback, see what you missed, and you can ask questions from there. All right, please give it a look. Remember, it's in your assignments tab. It's under the September, 9 and 10 assignment, and it's a link. It's a link to a form that you will go to for your study guide. All right, be sure to go there. So to get us started, we're talking about 2.1, which is called Slope-Intercept form. All right. Slope-intercept form we'll talk about in the vocabulary down below. So as you read through this, our first word is a linear equation. All right. Well, when you hear linear, think about the word that's written inside. It's a line. So a linear equation is an equation with the highest exponent of 1, but the most important detail is that it creates a line when you go to graph it. Okay, linear equations make lines. Then we have the slope-intercept form, and this right here is the most important detail of today's notes and into next class. Okay, our slope-intercept form is called y equals mx plus b. And what does this form do? It identifies your slope and your y-intercept. Funny how they named it slope-intercept form. Okay, it's going to give you your slope and it's going to give you your intercept, but more importantly, it's going to give you your y-intercept. And we'll talk about that here shortly. Okay. Then we have the two parts that go to slope-intercept form. So we have the y-intercept part. That's going to be your b. So notice how there was a b in my function. That's the same b I'm going to talk about in y-intercept. All right. Well, if it is the y-intercept, then I know that I'm talking about a coordinate on my y-axis. Y-intercept, think you're crossing over the y-axis. So it's anywhere on this axis right there. All right, and that's always going to be labeled by 0, comma, b, whatever our b value is. All right, there's lots of letters in this. Again, we're going to get lots of practice and kind of get you guys to understand this as we go. All right, then we have the slope part. So the slope is talking about the letter m. Again, that m is the same m that we saw up in our slope-intercept form. All right. And what that slope does is it tells us our rise over run. And we're going to ignore what this has right here. And I want to write it this way. So you have your rise over your run. Okay, rise divided by run. And when you're rising, think of the two directions you can go. You can go up and you can go down. All right, so that part that we just scribbled out, I'm just going to write it a little bit differently. When you go up, that means that your numerator is positive, and when you go down, that means your numerator is negative. And then when you're running, think of the two directions you can run. You can go right or you can go left. But when we're running to the right, we know that it's positive, and to the left, we know that it's negative. All right, again, all of this will come full circle as we go through the examples on the rest of our notes here in just a second. All right, then we have the formula. There's a formula for slope. Okay, this is important. You will need to know this. So maybe star it, highlight it, mark it with a Post-it, whatever you need in your notebook. That is going to be important for you for your Unit 2 test, not the one coming up, but the one after that. All right. So it's designated by this formula here. M equals y sub 2 minus y sub 1 divided by x sub 2 minus x sub 1. All right. Now I understand this looks like a lot, okay? However, when we talk about y sub 1 and x sub 1, it's talking about the first point, okay? And when we talk about x sub 2 and y sub 2, we're going to talk about the second point. All of this will come full circle in just a moment, but make sure that you are writing this formula down, right? It will not be given to you. You have to have it memorized. So let's get started on some questions. All right, so we have 8 problems here. The directions ask us to identify your slope and y-intercept in the following examples. Again, identify your slope and your y-intercept. All we have to say is what we labeled up top. Our slope is our m value and our y-intercept is our b value. Okay, well, remember this formula? I'm going to completely copy it on top of my example for question 1. And the reason I'm going to do that is because you will see that it will match nicely. So if I copy down y equals mx plus b right on top of this function, you can compare and you can work down and match the pieces. So for example, if I matched m right now, I would say that m equals 2. And if I matched my b right now, I would say that b was 4. Well, guess what? That's exactly what we wanted to do when we labeled our slope and our y-intercept. Okay, I'm going to take it just a little bit further though, and I'm going to say, well, what do we know about slope? All right, up above we talked about slope right here where we said slope was rise over run. Okay, so we want our slope to be a fraction. I told you guys as we started this semester that we don't like fractions, but we're going to have to be flexible and work with fractions anyways, okay? So if I look down at question 1, and I make this a fraction, I have 2 divided by, and to make it the same number, I want to put it over 1. Okay, let me rewrite this here so that it looks a little bit better for us. So I'd have 2 divided by 1, okay? What that tells us is that 2 is positive. Well, take a look at what happens in your numerator when you're positive. You're going to go up. So I know that on my graph, when I get to that next time I see you guys, I'm going to go up 2. And in my denominator, it's also positive. And so I know that I'm going to go to the right 1. And that's how slope is going to be helpful for us as we move into graphing and whatnot later on in the semester, okay? For the second part, for your y-intercept, I don't want to see just 4. I want us to take a step further. What is that coordinate going to be if it's considered my y-intercept? All right, you'll remember from up here where it says y-intercept, it is always 0, comma, whatever your b value was. So in our case, it's going to be 0, comma, 4. And that's the coordinate that I'm going to want you to show on your paper and on your homework tonight so that you can identify later when we get into our graph, you can identify that y-axis, that y-intercept a lot faster. Okay, so let's go ahead and move down and let's try question number 2. Same thing. I look at my function and I say, man, that matches really, really well with the function y equals mx plus b. Okay, so well, in fact, that I can write down my slope of 3 and my b of 2. But I want to go a little bit further, so I'm going to put that 3 into a fraction so that I can identify my rise over run. And with it as a fraction, I know that I'm going to go up 3 and right 1. Okay, again, 3 was positive, so I need to go up. And then the 1 in the denominator was also positive, so I need to go to the right. And then last but not least, for my y-intercept, I need the coordinate. So in this one, it's going to be 0, comma, 2. Okay. Again, we're just getting in the habit. If you can label your M and you can label your B, that's great. We're going to take it a step further and determine if we're going up, down, left, right, as well as figuring out that special coordinate for my y-intercept. All right. I'm going to let you guys go ahead and try question 3. All right. This one is going to be a little bit trickier when we talk about the rise over run, so we're going to talk about that in just a moment. But when you identify this one and you copy down y equals mx plus b on top, okay, again, we're doing this so that it will match. You have m equals -2 and b equals -1. Once you label your m, put it over 1 so that you can make it a fraction if it wasn't already. Okay. And we know that this time my numerator is going to be negative. So my numerator is actually going to take me down 2, but my denominator is still positive, so I'm still going to go to the right. So that negative is only going to apply to one of your values, not both. Okay? And I chose for it to go to the numerator. And last but not least, my y-intercept is going to be at the point 0, -1. Okay. For question 4, I'm just going to change the question really quick. It looks like it didn't save correctly. I wanted to say -5 over 2x. Same thing. If I write y equals mx plus b on top, let's label my m. It's going to be that entire fraction, making sure to put that negative on just one value. Okay, so I'm going to put it with the 5. I'm used to putting negatives on the numerators. That's my choice. I highly recommend that you stick with it. All right. So I'm going to put it with the 5. Let's go ahead and label this one really quick. The 5 is going to make my graph go down. And the 2 down below is positive yet again, so I'm going to go to the right. So down 5, right 2. That's what that means. For the second part, when it's asking about your b, when I copied b here, was there anything down below? All right. There was nothing in that spot, so that means that my b here is actually going to be considered a 0. Because if I went in and I wrote down this, and I said plus 0, would that change my function at all? Okay. If you're thinking, well, why isn't it 1? If I put plus 1, will that change the function? Yes. Okay, now you're adding a specific number at the end where 0 doesn't change anything at all when you add 0 to anything. All right, so we are going to consider our b value to be 0. With that in mind, I know that my y-axis, my y-intercept is going to be at 0, 0. Okay. Question 5, same thing. Y equals mx plus b. This time in front of my x term, you know it has to exist because x is really there. So I don't want a 0 in front. There is actually a 1 this time, okay? And again, there's a 1 this time because I'm not adding any longer. I'm actually multiplying. So between m and x, between those two values, there is a tiny, tiny, tiny multiplication symbol, okay? And in my case, it's a 1 times x here. So when I label my m, I have a 1. And when I label my b, if I match it up, it will also be 1. Make my slope over 1, make it a fraction. That means I'm going to go to the right one. Oops, sorry, getting ahead of myself here. That means I'm going to go up 1 and then to the right one. Remember, rise first, run second. So rise is on the top, running is on the bottom. And then my slope or my y-intercept is at 0, 1. Okay. Go ahead and give question 6 a try on your own. If you have a question or want to verify, you can just send it my way. That is fine. All right, it's very similar to question 5 up above. Question 7, however, if we were to again match it up, okay? When I match it up here, you guys see 3, let me get a highlighter. You guys see 3 and m, so you're going to say, oh, that must be my m, okay? But what else do you see with m in the normal function? We see an x, right? Do you see an x down here as well? Okay, we don't. So what this means is that my 3 is actually going to go with my b. So I'm going to write this out a little bit differently. If I'm taking the same function and I want it to be written with that x in there, okay, I can't have nothing in front of this x right now, because if I did, then we would think that that was a 1. But that's not the case because x does not exist in this function. So instead of a 1, I need this to be a 0, because I know that that x is not actually there, so it has to be a 0. So now I can find my slope. My slope is going to be 0, and my b is going to be 3. Same thing, I know your slope is 0, but we're still going to put it over 1. Get in that habit of making it a fraction. And this is going to tell me that I'm not going up or down, so I'm going up 0 and down 0, so it's not going up or down at all. But when I get to my 1 in the denominator, that tells me that I'm going to go to the right. All right? You guys will see this exact same problem on our next set of notes next time we have a notes day. Okay, you'll see what this graph will look like. That's why I want you to always put in your fraction. And then we get to our b, and it will be at 0, 3. All right, do this one more time. Question 8. Go ahead and copy down y equals mx plus b. This time we do have an x in our term. So we go in, and when we go to match that m, we're going to use a 1 this time. And when we match up the b, remember you are adding for the b, so what are we technically adding there? A 0. So my b is 0. Make your m a fraction. Tell me which direction you're going. Up 1, right 1, and your b value is going to tell you that you are going to 0, 0 on your y-axis. Okay, pretty simple. Again, same thing, making sure that you're labeling y equals mx plus b. You know the formula, or you should know the formula. That is going to be something else we got to memorize, is this formula y equals mx plus b. Okay. Once we know that, just match up the pieces, okay? Nobody's telling you that you can't write this function on top of every single problem. So if that's what's going to help you, let it help you, all right? Get in the habit of doing it now, because we will get into other forms of linear equations as the semester goes on, and you'll want to remember those steps, okay? For the last half of the notes, we have the directions given 2 points. Find the slope using the slope formula, okay? And if you remember, or you look up above, we have the slope formula m equals y2 minus y1 all over x2 minus x1. So we're going to see how this plays out right now. And again, that is referring to the slope formula, something you have to know for your test, your Unit 2 test. All right. So to get started on question 1, I know that this is my first point. Why do I know that's my first point? Because it's the first one that comes up. And then this one here will be my second point. So as soon as I see that I'm given 2 points and I'm getting asked for slope, I know I have to use this formula. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to those points, and I'm going to label them x and y. X and y, just like your normal coordinates that you're used to seeing in general, okay? Then I'm going to go back, and you'll see me go in with blue here. So on my first point, I'm going to put little 1s with my x and y. And then on my second point that was given, I'm going to put little 2s. So now I have the x1, y1, and an x2, y2. Where else did you see y2, y1, x2, x1? Right here, okay? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my function. I have m equals. Notice how there's a subtraction sign up top, divide in the middle, subtraction sign down below. I'm always going to write this every single time before I plug in my values. And now I'm going to take my y2s, my y1, my x2, my x1. So y2 is first. Go ahead and find your y2. You're going to replace it with the number 2 in this function. So you started with y2. It's going to get replaced with this 2 right here. Then you're going to subtract your y1. This is your y1 in the first point. So I'm going to put a 1 there. In your denominator, you're going to put your x2 first. So again, my x2 was 2 here. And then your x1 is going to be 1. So all you're left is just with some simple math. 2 minus 1 up above is going to give me 1. And 2 minus 1 down below will also give me another 1. Notice how this is a fraction. What do you know about slope and fractions? You know that it's your rise over run. So my slope is going to take me up 1, right 1. Okay. Of course, we know that 1 over 1 is still 1. So really, my final answer when I do simplify it will just be 1 when I simplify that fraction. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and try question 2. Remember, you're always starting with this. Before you even label anything, you know this is the formula you have to use. The only thing that are going to get replaced are these sections right here. Probably shouldn't use zeros when I do that. Okay, so right here, those are the values that we're looking for. Same values from our formula. Okay, and remember, you're always subtracting on top and subtracting down below. So I go in, I label my x, my y, my x, my y. This is my first point, so I'm going to give them 1s. Second point's going to give them 2s. And then I just plug in the values in their respective slots. So y2 first is going to be a 6 minus y1, which was 3. x2 down below, which was 6, minus x1, which was 3. Simplify. 6 minus 3 is 3. Again, 6 minus 3 is 3. Simplify. What is 3 divided by 3? Final answer, m equals 1 again. Okay. It's not going to be 1 every time. It just so happens that the first 2 were. All right. But now let's start talking about some negatives. This is why we always want to write our function. I was going to say formula. Either one. Formula, we always want to write down first. Okay, so by using those minus signs, we know that we're not going to forget them later. And you'll see why in just a second. So again, I'm finding my slope. So I have x and y. X and y. Your first points are going to get the 1s. Your second points are going to get the 2s. And I plug in. y2 this time was a positive 2. And my y1 this time was a 0. Going in the denominator, my x2 was a negative 2. And my x1 was a negative 3. Make sure you're bringing the entire piece down with it. Okay. So now when I simplify, I'm going to do the numerator first. 2 minus 0 is going to give me 2. But when I do this section here, I'm actually looking at negative 2 plus 3. Because those 2 minus signs are going to turn into a plus sign. So if I forgot that this minus sign was here initially, I'm going to forget that I am actually adding when I should be, or I'm going to forget that I'm subtracting when I should technically end up adding. Okay, 2 minus signs is going to give me a plus sign. So when I simplify that, negative 2 plus 3 is going to give me 1. Well, we like fractions for our slope. So this would take me up 2, right 1. We're good to go. If you want your simplified answer without a fraction, I will also accept m equals 2. Okay, we want those fractions when we get to graphing, so that's why I'm talking about it now, so that we can get that refresher next class when we get to graph. So for right now, you don't necessarily have to tell me which directions you're going. However, it will be helpful for you. The more practice you get now, it will be helpful for our next few classes as we move on. Okay, let's try question 4. X, Y, X, Y. Remember, we're talking about slope, so I'm going to put my formula down here with the minus signs. Go in, your first point's going to get the 1s, your second points are going to get the 2s, and we plug in y2 first, positive 5, y1, negative 5, x2 is a 1, and x1 is a negative 1. Again, pay close attention to those negatives. 5 minus a negative 5, well, what's going to happen there? It's going to turn into a plus. What's 5 plus 5? 10. And the same thing down below here. A negative and a negative is going to make it a plus. 1 plus 1 will give me 2. Simplify really quick. Our slope will be positive 5. Okay. Go ahead and do question 5, 6, and 7, and 8. All right. I will give those answers momentarily, but give those a shot. Go ahead and pause the video. Work them out. And as you do that, I will give you the answers and just the answers. And as soon as you unpause the video, you can check your work and see how we did. All right. So pause here, work out 5, 6, 7, and 8, and come back to see the answer. All right, so as you look through these answers, if you have, let me write that fraction differently for you guys, I'm sorry. I should write it like this so it's a little bit easier to see. Okay, if you have a negative and say like, for example, in question 6, I have it as the negative up top. If you put it down below with the 2, that is also okay. Okay, either one, as long as the negative is only with one term. All right, so for example, in question 5, when you work out the problem, the numerator should be the negative. Okay, you might have gotten m equals negative 2 over 10. That's how I got the negative 1 over 5. I simplified. Okay. Question 6, the negative, however, is actually going to be in the denominator, but you can change it to the numerator as long as it stays with just one term. If it moves to both, then you've changed it to a positive net value, and we don't want that. Okay, and then in question 7, you should have a negative with the 7. Again, I put the negative out front. It can look like that. It can also look like a negative with the 5, or it can also look like a negative with the 7. Okay, again, notice how the negative is just with one particular piece in each one of those answers. Okay, and last but not least, on question 8, the negative is technically with your 3 if you solved it that way. That will be fine. You can put the negative out front like I have there in purple, or you can put the negative with your 10. Okay, so that is all of our notes for today. Get in the habit, practice those formulas, both your slope-intercept formula and your slope formula, and have those memorized. You have homework on this. Okay, go ahead and check Teams for your homework assignment, and contact me if you guys have